morning, everybody. I'm so delighted to have such a crowd. This is great. Sustainability is often something that is considered a little bit of a niche market, and sustainability people are always saying how it affects everybody, and it's really important for the entire world, and really we need larger crowds. So this is great. Typically when I have these presentations, I have maybe 10, 15 people, and this is about 30. So I have a 100% increase from the last What Works kind of session that I did. So the topic today is talking about sustainability, but from a little bit more of a systems thinking dynamic and in terms of changing mindsets. So a lot of times when we think about, oh, don't tell me this doesn't work now. There we go. Okay, when we talk about sustainability, we often link it to the concept of the future, right? And the truth is, yes, but the more history ticks on, the more it becomes part of the present, right? And it's important for us to recognize that as we educate students, we don't just educate them about some sort of distant future, but we actually make them recognize that the future is something that's actually being created today, right now. So the fact that there are 30-some of you in this room is a great step forward for a positive future. So that's kind of the first thing that I'd like to share, is the fact that really kids need to realize that they're not part of a larger equation, let's say, of predetermined outcomes. They are part of creating that equation so that the outcome is determined by themselves as much as anybody else. So that's kind of step number one. Step number two is what actually motivates us to make the decisions that we make. I don't know, this is literally something found off the internet. I really liked it when I stumbled into it a couple years ago. And it's essentially somebody at a conference, and there's a person making a presentation, much like myself, but to a much larger crowd, you notice. And essentially they're talking about all the great things: energy independence, sustainability, green jobs, and so on and so forth. And one person turns to his partner and he says, what if this is all a big line? We're creating a better world for nothing. The truth is, creating a better world is a positive thing for everybody. And what we try to instill in our students at the American School of Dubai, which is partly what I represent, is that really the future, A, we can connect to and we can create, and B, we need to be positive. So previously some of you were here and Tatiana was giving her talk about all the difficulties with the world, and it's absolutely true. The problems that the world is facing on a global scale are quite overwhelming, and it's quite overwhelming for your average student, let's say in 6th grade, to suddenly realize that they have to take on an entire world of problems. And how do I do this as a 6th grader? So ultimately what this comes down to is trying to kind of create that idea of think global, act local. So you can create a situation where a child in a developmentally appropriate level can actually take on the world. So I love the fact that you were talking about plastic on campus. I love the fact that you were talking about planting trees. So those are all things that children can do. They're activities that can be performed so that they can actually take on the world, but in a smaller way where they feel they are empowered to make positive change. So why do we do the things we do? The truth is, often we do things we do because that's just how it's always been. Right? And somewhere, I don't know how long ago, plastics were brought into the world, and the industrial system came in about 100 and some years ago, or whatever that was, and somebody decided this was a cool new way to do it without really gathering the data. All right? And the data is telling us now that a lot of what has been taken for granted in the last 50, 60, 100 years is actually not really so positive. A lot of positive is also being done. Poverty is being eradicated and being addressed in many parts of the world. General standards of living have gone up overall, but we're also having a lot of problems with pollution, with the environmental degradation, all those kind of things. So those are all important conversations to have. So when we talk to our students, what we try to do is not only overwhelm them with the information. It's important that they recognize the information. It's important that they realize what the challenges are, but also give them a little bit of a positive twist. So I just wanted to share this with you for just a couple moments. Hopefully the sound works and everything's, uh-oh. It's not a good sign when it has that little, okay.
One day, we woke up to find that the music that our thought came from the breeze through the trees the night before. And we would go to work that morning riding the rays of the sun. It would light our cities and power our businesses. It would warm our homes. sources of conflict and fuel our economies. It will connect us all. It won't scar the land or poison the seas. The food we eat will be good for our bodies and good for the planet. And the weather that day won't make us worry for tomorrow. There will be more jobs and less disease. The sea level will stop rising. And species will stop dying. The question is, how do we get to that day from where we are today? All 7.3 billion of us. We start by deciding that beyond our doubts and differences, such a day truly exists. And that is something each of us can do today. We can make today the day we stop thinking that the changes required to get there are impossible and beyond us, and start realizing that they are not only possible, but what the future requires of us. We must stop turning from the warnings of science and fear and denial, and instead turn toward the solutions and partnerships we need. We can make today the day we stop pointing at each other in blame, and instead chart a new course together. We have never faced a crisis this big.
It's a heavy door.
We have never had a better opportunity to solve it. We have everything we need to wake up to a different kind of world. We need our leaders to be brave and their choices to be bold. They will either remember us as the generation that destroyed its home, or the one that finally came to respect it. We have every reason in the world to act. We can't wait until tomorrow. This is our only home. You can choose today to make a world of difference.
Okay, can you take just a moment, talk to your partner for a second, whoever happens to be next to you, about something hopeful you got out of that video. I'll give you 30 seconds. Just chat about it for a second. Okay, thank you very much for that. Would anyone like to share something hopeful they just talked about? Anyone want to share out, or you prefer to keep it to yourselves? Something hopeful, come on. There's got to be something positive. Please, go ahead. Okay, that's correct. So we can start right now. Super. Okay, so we need to realize that we can change, and hopefully the fact that you're all in here, that realization's already hitting, so that's really good too. Anybody else? Go ahead.
With our wise decisions taken today, we could look forward for a better tomorrow.
Beautiful. So based on the decisions today, we can affect tomorrow. Go ahead.
That there is hope.
There is hope, all right? And it's important for our kids to know that there is hope, all right? Even if it's hopeless, all right? We need to focus on the hope aspect, because without hope, there isn't that motivation to do what's right, all right? So I could just as easily say, oh, who cares? It's not going to happen, so I might as well throw away my plastic bottles. I might as well not question anything that's ever happened before. So if I'm to question things, I need to know that there's a possibility that my vision of tomorrow, a better tomorrow, is actually possible. Now, there are 7.5 billion people in the world, so our visions might be a little bit different from one to the other. And so really what it comes down to is that. Right? And so ultimately what we're talking about as we move forward is the concept of sustainability. So yes, we want to have better lives. We want better lives for everyone. Nobody wants poverty. Nobody wants dead fish. Nobody wants destroyed rainforests. Nobody wants those things. But typically it's because we don't know the story. Right? We don't know that what I buy in the supermarket actually affects the Borneo rainforest so much. Right? We don't really know that what I drink in my tea might affect Sri Lankan ecosystems, things like that. So the stories need to be shared, and we need to basically be able to work within a sustainability pattern. So the concept of sustainability is that we're somehow, as we move forward in the world, we are somewhere between enough and not too much, right? So what that defines is really pretty much every decision we make, right? So do I need 3 cars? I probably don't. Okay, do I need, 6 items when I go to a supermarket? Maybe, maybe not, depending on my circumstances. But these decisions are made on a daily basis. So sometimes they're big, huge decisions, governmental decisions, administrative decisions, classroom decisions, and sometimes they're actually personal decisions of what it is that I want to do. So typically the global goals are what we kind of look at in terms of moving forward. The world a few years ago, meaning the United Nations, which represents our governments, decided to kind of step forward and move towards these 17 goals, the last of which is basically partnerships and working together, which is what this kind of represents right here in this room. So the idea is that, yeah, these are all important, but really they're not isolated. Poverty cannot be dealt with just with poverty if we don't also talk about sustainable communities, for example. You can't talk about clean water and sanitation and not affect kind of hunger and well-being. All of those things are interrelated. So now comes in the talk about, okay, what does that mean? So when we're talking about our kids, yes, it's important that they recycle, they do all these behaviors, but it's also important that we make them the owners of the decisions that we're wanting them to make. So we can all tell them recycle that plastic bottle or don't use that plastic bottle, which we should all do, but ultimately that doesn't get into the mindset and mind frame of that particular kid. So really our goal isn't sustainability, it's sustainability through shifting a mindset. All right, and to get to that mindset, you have to use certain tools and things. So the way we kind of define sustainability thinker is through, first of all, being positive about the world. We call that kind of solutionary. Okay, so the little video you just saw, hopeful, optimistic, yes, you can make a difference. It's important that kids recognize that. That's step number 1. Step number 2 is looking through the world and all their decisions through multiple lenses. I'll get to that in the next slide here for a moment, meaning that you need to look at the multiple dynamics of things. And third is that they kind of use systems thinking, and that's kind of what we're going to finish with in today's little session. And systems thinking is kind of subdivided in, if you like, by creating internet connections, recognizing relationships, and thinking sort of in a more cyclical manner rather than a linear manner. Has anybody seen Story of Stuff? Have you? Okay, if you have a moment, storyofstuff.org, okay, is a really nice website. It's very, I don't know how to describe it. It's a little political for some people, but generally it questions the way that the industrial system works, and it questions the way the linear aspect of things. So essentially taking things, using them, and dumping things. So that's the idea. How do we take that linear economy effectively and switch it into more of a circular economy where we're not actually working on designing something by the fact that it gets thrown away, but by the fact that it gets redesigned over and over and over again. All right, so let me go through the next question. So multiple lenses was one of our topics. And the multiple lenses that we talk about are kind of fourfold. On the very beginning slide, I didn't talk about Compass Education. I need to be honest about my involvement. Compass Education is a not-for-profit educational organization that focuses on sustainability mindset and systems thinking. And so a lot of the tools that I use come from Compass Education. It's originally based in Southeast Asia. Chiang Mai, I believe, is where it originated. But there are a lot of great ideas that they've developed, and really it's just a bunch of teachers who've decided to kind of take this on as their thing as far as international schools go. So I'm very fortunate to be a member of this kind of group. and they do offer workshops and so on and so forth. But the basic concepts, they have something called the compass, right? And their compasses are a very basic tool of trying to look at things from a multiple perspective area. So they have four basic what they call conditions. One being nature, which is the N in the compass, E, which is the economy, S, which is society, and then W, which is well-being, which really comes down to your personal well-being and wellness and health and all those kind of things. So when we think about things from a sustainable standpoint, when we ask kids to think sustainably, what we mean partly is that you look at things in those four categories. So I'm going to go to my favorite, which is a t-shirt. So I go shopping, I go to Gap, let's say, and I walk into Gap and I decide I'm going to buy a t-shirt, right? And typically what I'll do is I'll think of two things. One, does it look nice and fit, right? So what's the utility that I get out of it? And the second one, what is the cost, right? Is it worth it for the price of what I'm getting? So a sustainable mindset would take us, one step further. Now you'll notice we have nature, we have economy, we have society, and we have well-being. This is kind of a little tool that Compass uses, typically without these pictures. The pictures are just here as added benefit, if you like. But you could use this in a classroom, but really ultimately what happens is you just use this in your brain as you start getting into a sustainable mindset. So the idea is I walk in, I'm looking at these t-shirts, and then the question is, what is the story of this t-shirt from the nature standpoint? What is the story of this t-shirt from the economy standpoint? What is the story of this t-shirt from societal standpoint? And what is the story of this t-shirt from well-being? So what I'd like for you guys to do, take a t-shirt, talk to your partner, and try to come up with certain different lenses of looking at this t-shirt rather than just the price and whether it fits and looks nice on you. All right, so that's your job for the next minute, to talk to your partner and identify natural, ecological elements of that story, like the backstory of this product, the economic aspects, the social aspects, and well-being. It can go in any direction. Typically, this might take 45 minutes, so I'm only giving you 2. So don't expect a majorly in-depth conversation, but at least you can get the conversation going. So 2 minutes. Sorry, we don't have a chair for you. I apologize. Are you okay? All right. Okay, if you don't mind, can you kind of focus your attention a little bit? So I'm guessing the conversations would have gone in all sorts of different directions. So I would like to invite again for you guys to kind of go through maybe some thoughts that you just shared, if you're comfortable doing that. My intent is to try to find, multiple dimensions. So if all you talked about was economy, then that's okay, but we'll find somebody else to sort of cover in the rest of the area. So does anybody want to just start with one thing that you just talked about related to your t-shirt? Yeah, go ahead.
Well-being, if we see the well-being, whether it suits to the environment, the seasons, how we are carrying through that t-shirt, if we are wearing it,
Mm-hmm.
then how it suits to the environment, if
Okay.
it protects us or
Super.
how it takes
Okay, so does the shirt work with the environment that you need to deal with?
environment.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, go ahead.
Whether this shirt is biodegradable or not.
Okay, so whether the shirt was biodegradable. What else?
How was this shirt made?
Okay, how was the shirt made? What do you mean by that?
We have like simply bottles,
Okay,
recycling of the plastic.
that's correct. Okay, so you could, that's correct. So what's the backstory of what was the shirt made by? Is it a recycled shirt? Is it a plastic bottle shirt? Is it a normal shirt? Is it organic cotton shirt? You know, what kind of background story is there? Did you?
Was it made?
Where was it made? Why does that matter to you?
Well, if it's from a poorer country, I tend to buy that
Okay,
because to sustain their economy.
excellent. Okay, so that's an economic connection too, right? So trying to support a certain economy. Anybody else?
Besides economy, we also look at the material required for making this shirt, whether these materials are recyclable or not.
Mm-hmm.
Besides this, whether these are economic or not.
Excellent. Okay, so what kind of materials are we dealing with? One last comment? Yeah.
Social aspect, I want to look good.
I'm sorry?
Social aspect maybe, if you want to look good.
Yeah, does it look good on you? That's an important decision. Go ahead. Okay, what were the environment of the workers that made it? Okay, so that's a great social connection as well, and economic probably too. Okay, so you can recognize just from this 2-minute conversation that the dynamics are pretty huge. Okay, a product is not a product. Okay, a product has an entire story and history to that product. So I should say that, what's it called? United World College in Singapore decided that they would talk about their t-shirts this way. They wanted to come up with a t-shirt for a special event that they were doing for the students. It was a conference, I think. 200 kids were arriving from all of Southeast Asia or something like that. And organizations, they can prove to us, they have a certificate that says that the workers have been treated well and are paid fair wages. All right, you'll notice coffee, for example, has fair trade coffee and all that kind of stuff. Also that it didn't have a negative impact. It is Singapore, so they didn't want to have a negative impact on the rainforest areas, things like that. So they talked about organic elements, all those kind of things. So what they essentially decided to do was, yes, get the t-shirt, but focus on all those kind of sustainable things of how the t-shirt was made. Try to source it as locally as possible, which in Singapore is a little bit tricky, to be fair. And the other thing they did was actually use the t-shirt itself as an advertisement for sustainability that then they decided should be the theme for the entire event. So they took it in all sorts of different directions. Now the idea for getting kids to have that sustainable mindset is basically letting them see the bigger picture, not just talking as you might in economics about pure costs and benefits and all that kind of stuff, but extend the conversation forward. Now we use the compass with kids as young as 2nd grade, probably. Now you do have to make certain adjustments, of course. The conversation isn't as extensive as what we just had. In certain cases, you use pictures so that they can understand the concepts, because a 2nd grader might not understand what you mean when you say economy, all right, or something along those lines. But they'll certainly understand that something costs something, or someone is getting some money, you know, those kind of things. So it's a great little tool for kind of multiple systems thinking. All right, the second part of systems thinking is trying to get all the connections together and getting kids to recognize the interconnections and how one thing might affect another, recognizing cause and effect. So one part is just the actual multi-dimensionality of it, and the next part is how does it all fit together. So let me hope that this video works as well. And I know the sound wasn't super high, but we'll do what we can. Oh, that's better. You can see the writing well enough. Okay, so I'm hoping you got the idea that really everything works in systems, whether systems are kind of formally acknowledged or whether they don't. Your family is a system, the school you work in is a system, your classroom is a system, the way your students interact is a system, and the idea, hopefully positive, that you got out of that is the truth is if you can recognize the system and better any component of that system, the entire system benefits. So the truth is, ultimately, if everything is interconnected, anything you decide to focus on to benefit will benefit the system in its totality, right? So if I can eliminate plastic waste, that's not just plastic waste benefit. That is a social benefit in certain communities. That's a well-being benefit in other communities. The ecosystems benefit. There are a lot of multiple benefits from all those who are more directly or perhaps indirectly affected by that system. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, so here's the chicken and the egg system. All right, this is called a causal loop diagram, very basic. All right, the concept behind these things, and you don't need to remember all this, but the concept behind these things is that things are interrelated and they have a causal effect. So something leads to something else, all right, and sometimes they have multiple effects. So in this particular case, let me focus on the green side. So you have the chicken and the egg. All right, now you'll notice there are little plus signs because this is a positive relationship. So the more eggs you have, the more chickens you're going to have. The more eggs you have, the more chickens you're going to have. So those are just positive relationships. However, when the chicken decides to cross the road, it becomes a little bit more of a problem. All right, so the more chickens you have and the more road crossings of those chickens, it's entirely possible that actually you have less chickens as a result of too many chickens trying to cross the road. All right, so the relationship could be positive or the relationship could be negative, but really the conversations you're having at the student level is what is the causality of these two things? What causes another? And is that cause a positive cause or is that cause a negative cause? And that's where kind of the systems thinking conversation happens. Again, it would happen at different levels. So of course at a second grade level or first grade level, it would be a much more basic conversation, perhaps only one variable involved. When you get to the higher levels of the administration, they do this kind of stuff too. So I don't know if you guys are principals or anything like that, but at the higher levels of school administration, they often have these types of conversations. So really what we're doing is we're kind of pulling that down so the kids have a wider worldview and a more sustainable perspective on things. Okay, so now that we've done all that, I just wanted to run you through a little activity. The truth is, in an ideal setting, you would be in groups of probably 4 or 5 at a table each, but the setting here is a little bit tricky. So what I'm going to try to do is kind of simulate that just a little bit. So I would like a main topic. Give me a sustainability main topic. Anybody want to throw an idea out? Uh-oh. Water conservation. Okay, so we need to start with a question, though. So what kind of question would you like to ask around water conservation?
How to prevent it?
Okay.
How to enable it?
Okay, how to enable it? Okay, so the question is, how do we enable water conservation? Is that a fair question? Okay, so what you would typically do is have people sit down and think individually first, all right? And this is called the power of 6. The ideal goal is for each individual person to come up with at least 6 ideas because you want a lot of ideas on the table. All right, now at the moment, you won't have the requisite 10 minutes or so to come up with 6 ideas. So really, in your mind, just come up with a couple ideas that are related to the question of, what was it again? Okay, so water conservation, right? So if you can just, to yourself, just think about it for a moment and try to address that actual thing. And then what I'll do is I'll move over here, and typically you'd have a nice big whiteboard where you can put everything, but we'll do it in miniature just a little bit. So think about that question, water conservation. Don't talk to anybody yet. We'll go from there. Okay, so let's say you ran out of time now, right? So again, in an ideal situation, you've got a good 5-10 minutes, whatever people feel they need to get 6 ideas. It's not a required 6 ideas. Somebody has 5, that's perfectly fine. The idea is to have a good number of ideas. So let's share. Let's pretend you guys are students and I'm in the classroom and we've just thrown out the idea of water conservation. Can you give me one of your thoughts?
The importance of conservation of water in UAE.
Okay, so it's important in the UAE. Is that okay? Yes. Sorry, I'm writing in a little bit, whoops. UAE. Anybody else want to share something? Rainwater harvesting. harvesting. Okay? Yeah?
Avoid water pollution.
Okay, avoid water pollution.
Bring awareness for water wastage.
Say again, awareness?
Awareness for water wastage.
Okay, awareness of waste. Water waste, okay?
Usage of water.
Reduce the usage of water.
Recycling.
Oops, reduce.
Safe drinking water.
I'll put recycling a little bit different. Okay, you want safe drinking water? Anybody else? Sorry, go ahead.
Reusing the water, as she said, that kitchen water can be used for kitchen garden.
Okay, hold on. So kitchen water in gardens. Okay, so if something's been said already, you just leave it. You don't have to put a double statement. Anybody want to add one more? We can add maybe one or two more, and then we'll continue forward with the conversation.
Responsible consumption.
Okay, responsible consumption. So
Small reduce it to the water footprint rather than the actual water.
okay, so I'm putting footprint. Are people here aware of what a water footprint is? Because that might be worth taking a second to talk about. So water footprint is basically the cumulative amount of water that's needed for either your lifestyle or for a specific item. So for example, Tatiana in the previous session talked about for every bottle of water that you buy, it needs 3 more times that amount of water in the production of the bottle. So you're getting a bottle, but you're wasting 3. So that's true of pretty much anything. So I could have something to eat, and there's a water footprint involved with that something to eat. I can get something, I don't know, a new set of desks for my classroom. There's a water footprint involved with the production, the distribution, the transport, and all that of that thing. So as a consumer, anything you do has a water footprint, just like it has a carbon footprint, just like it has a monetary footprint, you know, all those kind of things. So again, kind of looking back. Okay, does anybody want to add one final thought here? Okay, so the guiding question could be up to you, and typically it would take a direction. So it would either be something along the lines of what are the problems with water conservation, so you can identify problems, or the other option would be the more optimistic one, which is, okay, how can we solve water conservation? What are the options there? Exactly. So depending on your kind of approach and what you're trying to get out of a session, for example, you can go one way or another. All right, so the next step then, so this is kind of our brainstorming. Again, this could take up to 20 minutes for people to do, and typically done at a smaller scale, not quite as large as this. But the next point is to start making causality. So you noticed in the chicken or the egg one, we had a starting point, we had an ending point, and we had causality. So more chickens equals more eggs equals more chickens, right? So what I'd like for us to do here is, and typically this would be done in front of a board or at a table, so everyone involved is actually standing there looking at this thing. So this setting doesn't lend itself for that, so I'm trying to emulate it a little bit. But let's say we had each table had one of these and 5 people put this together. All right, so then the next step would be, okay, so now we have possibilities. What are we going to make to connect those possibilities? So take a look at these. We have important in the UAE, we have kitchen water and gardens, we have avoid pollution, we have responsible consumption, reduce, we have recycling of water, we have awareness of waste, we have safety issues, and we have rain harvesting. Okay, again, the universe could have been much bigger. So I need for one of you to make a connection between any 2 of these, but it has to be a cause and effect connection. So one thing leads to another. Take a look. See what you got.
If you recycle, you will reduce.
Okay, so if you recycle, you will reduce. Okay. Okay, hold on. So if you recycle, water pollution will be less. So it's affected, but it's, oops, what have I just done? Sorry. Okay, there. Okay, and this one? So more recycling is more. If you raise, where are we? If you raise awareness, it will reduce. So that's positive as well. Anybody else?
Responsible consumption, that kitchen water and gardens.
Okay, so responsible consumption could include, let's say, kitchen water and gardens. Okay?
In the UAE, when
Okay, so that way? Okay, so if we recognize the importance in the UA, that should increase the awareness. Okay, what else? Consumption, hold on. Consumption, where are we? Ah, this one? This one or this one? Where am I starting? This one? Okay, so kitchen and goes to recycling. Got it. Okay, so increase, and that's a positive experience too. Okay, yeah. Rainwater harvesting goes to reduce. Woo! Whoops. Okay. So where's that? Hold on, where am I? Rainwater harvesting. Okay, so this is a different one. Okay, sounds good. Okay, let's stop right there for a moment. Have you noticed how as the conversation has gone, more and more people have gotten involved? Okay, so the first one is always the hardest one because, you know, people are a little concerned about what they're going to say and how, like, does it make sense and is this a bad idea or I don't know, whatever. But once you start throwing things out and give people the chance, again, we're doing it in public, so it's a slightly different dynamic. If you had a group of 4 students, let's say, they're usually more open to having the same conversation with themselves, right? And you as a facilitator would kind of just flutter around a little bit. But the idea would be that the kids are making these connections. So they've looked at things from different lenses, they've put possibilities together, and now they're creating their own little systems map, which is relatively complicated. Is that fair? Okay, so the next thing in our case at the American School of Dubai, we take this kind of information and we try to figure out what leverage there is. So in our case, we do what we call service learning. So kids are attempting to take an issue, in this case water conservation, and actually try to address it. So we use this in a way that allows the kids to prioritize. So we might say, okay, this is our systems map, let's say. And so based on what you see here, what would you say are the nodes that have the most connections? What has the most connections in your opinion? Recycling? Okay. Now you might, this conversation could go different ways, and as a teacher you don't want to say, no, that's not true. You know, it's obviously rainwater harvesting. Okay, this is where the kids get to decide, all right? If you're comfortable with that, everything's cool. Okay, so you've just said recycling, right? So in some cases there might be multiple. So there could be 2, there could be 3, that's okay. There are no rules about this. The rule is having the conversation and making those connections. All right, so in a situation where, let's say I'm in a classroom and I want to address a certain issue, in this case water harvesting, we will do this activity to try to identify which option has what we refer to as the most leverage. Okay, so all of these are involved, although safety seems to be a little bit of an outlier in our particular conversation. So yes, it exists, but we haven't found any specific connections. So if I decided that really my focus on dealing with water water conservation was safety, that's legal. I mean, there is a connection there, but that's correct. And I didn't extend the conversation. And don't worry about safety. It's okay. It's fair and it's appropriate that it's there, but we haven't made any connection. So basically in our particular conversation, it would be, okay, if you wanted to do something about it, or even better, let's do something about it, what would be the best connector that we can choose? And the kids, in this case you guys, might say, well, actually recycling seems to be a good starting point because recycling has all these connections, right? Especially if it's the cause rather than the effect, all right? So in this case, I haven't really checked, to be honest, if it's the cause or the effect. But ultimately, if you can find a cause which has multiple connections, then that becomes a good leverage point because in addressing that, you're also addressing these other things because they're all part of the same system. Does that make sense to you guys? Okay, so the idea here is not that we just do this once and we're done, or we use the compass once and we're done, but that you use that on an ongoing basis. So a child who's moving from 3rd grade to 4th grade to 5th grade will be exposed to possibly the same exact tools, right? So they can become a natural thinker of sustainability. So when they do go shopping in the vegetable section, all right, they can have those things going on. They could be sitting there going, okay, you know, Mom, what are you doing? Like, this is from Australia, all right, whatever. All right, the conversation might be, and Mom might say, well, why does it matter? It tastes good, all right? And the kid might say, well, you know, the footprint of sending something from Australia to here is ridiculous. Why don't we choose something from Turkey instead, right? It's nice and close by, and okay, maybe it's not UAE specific, but it's as close as we can get if that's the lens that the kid wants to think about it. So ultimately, over time, and given the tools to expand their thinking, they become sustainable thinkers rather than just participants in sustainable behaviors that they may or may not recognize the importance of. And I guess I will stop there and open it for questions if you guys have any. Yeah, Ann?
Mine's just a comment as someone who I went to the compass training, I've been to some workshops and I want to get fully trained. But sometimes when you come back to your school and you say, oh, I've learned this great compass thing, systems thinking, they think, oh, but our focus is this. It's a great critical thinking tool, outstanding critical thinking. And there's not a school in the world that doesn't want to do critical thinking. So that's a great leverage.
Yeah.
If you're looking for leverage for a way to integrate more systems thinking, your critical thinking is the compass tool is a great vehicle, and it's very, very user-friendly.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. And it's not intended to be a marketing ploy or anything like that, but the truth is, yeah, the beauty of these tools are that they're actually relatively simple and can be used. And because they don't have too many parts, it's something that a teacher could literally just say, okay, well, here's the compass. Let's think about anything. We had a classroom, I think it was a 6th grade class, that was focusing on Roman toilets in ancient Rome. And they decided to do the compass on the Roman toilets and talk about well-being and health and sanitary issues versus, you know, modern world and all this kind of stuff. So really, you can use it on pretty much anything you would like to use it on. It is, you're right, a critical thinking tool. But it does automatically, by the use of the tool, have kids think about things from different perspectives, which I think are hugely important in developing a mindset. So on the table here, just before you run away, I've been asked to share, if you guys don't mind, for feedback purposes for KHDA, they would like to know what you think. Please don't get me fired or anything like that. Oh, I wasn't hired, so everything's fine. Also on the table here, there are a couple sheets. I wasn't expecting quite so many of you, so it's a good problem to have. But there are different kinds of sheets. One is for an online course that's being taught by Compass Education. The other one is kind of on a line of options that Compass Education offers. And the smaller one is literally the two tools that I shared today. So thank you very much for your time. I appreciate your being here. I'm right here if you want to talk to me. And obviously feel free to communicate at any point. If you can. I could make them online if you want. I haven't put there are links to a lot of these on the presentation. It's just that. All right, thank you everybody. Thank you.